My husband seems to be heartbroken after coming home. He sits on the couch in silence, staring at his phone with a gloomy expression. I know his girlfriend is a drama queen. I guess she dumped him again. Well, it's good for me. I can't help but smirk. Fortunately, my boyfriend isn't like that. Chapter 1. On the way to the prenatal checkup, Henry's phone rang. The girl on the other end of the line, Cody, hastily demanded that he come over right away. Henry glanced at me, looking conflicted, and said, I have something to do right now. Can I come later? But I have a stomach ache. You have to be here within half an hour. Henry furrowed his brow, turned towards me as if he wanted to say something, but seemed unable to find the right words. I lowered my gaze and calmly said, Go ahead. I'll be fine on my own. He hesitated for a moment, then hurriedly parked the car by the roadside. Take care of yourself and call me if anything happens. The black Maybach accelerated away, and I didn't pay him any attention as I hailed a taxi. We both knew that the so-called call me if anything happens was just a polite gesture. When Henry is with June, even if I blow up his phone, it's useless. Since I've gone for prenatal checkups on my own before, I confidently took a taxi to the hospital. When the doctor was looking at the ultrasound report, June called me. Hello? I could hear the sound of rushing water on the other end of the phone, and June's voice carried an unabashed provocation. Flora, guess what Henry is doing right now? I remained expressionless. He's probably taking a shower, getting ready to fool around with you after he's done. Am I just part of your little play? June probably didn't expect that I, as the original wife, would remain so calm upon finding out about my husband's affair. She was momentarily taken aback. After a moment of silence, she gritted her teeth and said, You're going for a prenatal checkup today, but I managed to get him here with just one phone call. Flora, isn't it pathetic that as a woman, you can't even keep your husband's heart? I scoffed. Why would I want to keep his heart? I just want to keep his money. You're the one who has his heart, but the money he spends on you is our shared property as a married couple. June, I advise you to be sensible. If one day I'm not happy and decide to sue you, you'll have to give it all back. She stayed silent for a while, then hung up the phone in anger, holding back her frustration. The doctor, feeling slightly awkward, smiled at me and lowered the raised eyebrow. Pregnant women shouldn't get angry. Your attitude is quite good. I waved my hand dismissively. That mistress of his wants nothing more than to provoke me every day, hoping to make me angry enough to die from it. But I've developed immunity. Then why are you still having a child with him? I shrugged. He has money, after all. The doctor remained silent. I was just joking. Having a child is not about money. When I got pregnant, I didn't know about June at that time. I still thought this child could save our broken marriage with Henry. But later on, I realized that some things can't be fixed, and spilled water can't be gathered. Not to mention having a child. Even if I had a whole battalion of children, Henry wouldn't change his mind. But it doesn't matter. Thankfully, I found someone new. The door was knocked, and as I turned around, I smiled upon seeing a man with sweat-drenched hair, wearing a slightly wrinkled white t-shirt and jeans. It was obvious that he rushed out of the house. However, his handsome appearance in the disheveled clothes gave him a unique sense of fashion. His eyes sparkled, and he gasped for breath as he smiled. I'm late. Chapter 2. I reached out and patted his t-shirt. You've turned a $1,600 t-shirt into something that looks like it's worth $60. Such a waste. Bruce held my hand. I was in a hurry. As soon as I received your message, I rushed out. He lowered his head and looked down. Oh no! I wore my socks inside out. I couldn't help but smile. The doctor froze, looking at me, then turned to look at Bruce. I felt a bit embarrassed. Oh, this is my boyfriend. The doctor's mouth twitched. Bruce quickly leaned in. Doctor, are there any issues with her checkup this time? The doctor cleared his throat and refocused his attention. You've been a bit anemic throughout, so you still need to be careful in the later stages. Bruce listened attentively, taking out his phone and jotting down notes one by one. One by one. If there were parts he didn't understand, he would ask the doctor to slow down. Towards the end, the doctor's expression became somewhat complicated. Your boyfriend is really good to you. I nodded. Yeah, he's much better than my deadbeat husband. On the way back home, Bruce couldn't help but ask, when will you finally divorce him? Last time my parents wanted me to go on a blind date, I told them I had a girlfriend, but they didn't believe me and insisted I bring her back to see. I turned my head to look at him. Bruce's ears turned slightly red, and I noticed that his eyelashes were quite long, and his eyes were clear and shining, reflecting a deep black. Suddenly, it reminded me of the little dog next door that waits for me to throw the ball. I casually replied, "We'll see. I'll do it as soon as possible." The encounter with Bruce was quite dramatic. At that time, I happened to come across a suspense novel on the airplane and found it exceptionally well written. Intrigued, I decided to read all the books by the author and was increasingly impressed by the author's concise writing style and unpredictable plot twists. Coincidentally, the author, who went by the pen name Legless Bird, was having a book signing event in my city, so I decided to go and have a look. I had imagined the author to be a middle-aged man, considering the maturity of his writing. To my surprise, he turned out to be a young man in his early 20s and surprisingly good-looking. His face was the kind that could make waves even in the entertainment industry. That was Bruce. Casually, I asked him, the killer wasn't actually murdering for his mother, right? Unexpectedly, Bruce lifted his head abruptly. You figured it out? He excitedly started discussing the plot with me until his assistant coughed from behind. Sir, there are still many people waiting in line. Reluctantly, Bruce handed me the book. All right, thank you. He winked at me, a mischievous smile flickering in his clear eyes. As I opened the book, I noticed that besides his signature, there was a string of numbers. It was his phone number. From there, things unfolded naturally. We initially only discussed the plot. Later on, we discovered that we had many shared interests. On the day he confessed his feelings to me, I hesitated for a moment but decided to explain my situation to him. At that time, Henry and I had already fallen apart, and he had June by his side. We were practically strangers to each other, but I was already carrying Bruce's child. Bruce was silent for a long time and said he needed to think about it. 3 days later, just when I thought he might give up, he called me. I don't want to be the other man in your life, but in these 3 days, I realized that I can't let go of you. And so, Henry had June, and I had Bruce. Chapter 3. After returning home, I found Henry sitting on the couch with a gloomy expression, as if he had just been through a heartbreak. I immediately realized that he must have had another fight with June. Most likely, it was another round of breaking up and blocking each other, a tactic they had used countless times before. June was Henry's first love. They got together when she was only 17 and they stayed together for a solid 5 years. Back then, Henry wanted to marry June and even had the engagement ring ready. However, Henry's mother disagreed and went to extreme lengths, threatening to end her own life if they didn't break up, and she pushed me on to Henry. I was a student sponsored by Henry's mother from the age of 10 until I turned 18. She had been supporting me financially. She not only paid for my education but also provided for my daily needs and took care of me. After I got into university, as an orphan with nowhere to go during festivals and holidays, she would invite me to celebrate with her family. During my freshman year, I applied for scholarships and started working part-time, no longer relying on her financial support. However, we still maintained our relationship, and I would always visit her with gifts during the holidays. From starting a small supermarket with borrowed money to eventually owning a third of the commercial properties in the university town, I had been running my own business for 2 years. I had earned over $12 million. It was probably during that time that Henry's mother noticed my business acumen. Henry's father had passed away in a car accident years earlier, and his mother's health was frail, often bedridden. Henry, being a second generation with little business sense, made his mother worry about the future of the family. June studied art, and Henry's mother believed she wouldn't be able to contribute to the family's business. She had a long conversation with me, pleading for me to marry Henry and help manage the family's assets. I remained silent for a long time but eventually agreed. She had supported me for 9 years, and I would protect Henry for 9 years. After those 9 years, if our relationship was still strong, we would continue to stay together. If he still didn't love me, then we would get a divorce. I was 20 years old back then. Now I'm 29. On the couch, Henry wore a black shirt rolled up to his elbows, with his immaculate Italian handmade leather shoes. I frowned and asked, "Why haven't you changed your shoes?" Annoyed, Henry replied, what did you do to her again today? Only then did I understand that he was upset with me. Because of the remarks I made to June earlier today. I sneered. Henry, have you lost your mind? It was her who called me first. She's so shameless as a third party, and instead of scolding her, you come to confront me? You know very well about her temper. Henry seemed somewhat guilty, lowering his voice. She's been spoiled since childhood, with a hot temper. So what if you let her have her way? I remained expressionless. Sorry, I don't have parents to teach me to accommodate a spoiled princess. If you're willing to be a dog, go ahead and keep at it. I have no interest in that. Henry's face looked a bit unpleasant. Do you have to say it so harshly? I felt like I would explode if I said another word to him, so I slammed the door and entered the bedroom. Lying on the bed, I sighed as I looked at my visibly pregnant belly. To be honest, I didn't want to keep this child after finding out about June's existence. It was Henry's mother who begged me with tears not to get an abortion. Even tremblingly getting off her sick bed to kneel down before me. Without Henry's mother's support, I might still be in the village, already becoming a farmer or factory worker with several children. She changed my entire life, and I couldn't refuse her. This child is my final compromise, a way to fully repay her years of support. I told her that after the child is born, I will divorce Henry. In the living room, Henry was on the phone, coaxing June with a gentle voice. I covered my face with a pillow, not wanting to listen. June is a drama queen. Even before she got together with Henry, I had heard about her. Perhaps she was spoiled since childhood, always throwing tantrums and breaking up with Henry every few days, and each time Henry would willingly apologize and make up with her. This was another reason why Henry's mother didn't approve of their relationship. The last time they really broke up was June's 27th breakup proposal. Henry was probably finally tired, and combined with his mother's emotional blackmail, he didn't back down for the first time, and so they went their separate ways. Actually, when I first got together with Henry, I also had hopes that we could have a good life together. He was good-looking. Different from Bruce's clean and innocent boyishness, Henry had a rugged and handsome look with a hint of rebelliousness in his brows. From his appearance, you couldn't tell that he was actually a hopeless romantic. In the beginning, for the first year or two, Henry saw me as someone his mother forced upon him, and he was quite resentful towards me. But people aren't like plants or trees, and who can remain heartless after thousands of days and nights together? He finally softened towards me. During the best times, I even thought that he had forgotten about June. We would hold hands and go to the supermarket in the evening to buy groceries, then cook together. At night, he would book a restaurant I liked for Valentine's Day and give me a gift that he personally selected. When I woke up from a nightmare, he would hold me in his arms and gently pat my back to comfort me, then we would fall asleep together. There was a period of time that could be called happiness, and I truly believed that we would continue like this forever. Until a year ago, he suddenly changed his attitude and became increasingly impatient with me. At first, I thought it was just the 7-year itch, and I was somewhat hopeful when I got pregnant, thinking that this child could save our relationship. But later on, I realized that it wasn't just some 7-year itch. June came back. That's when I understood that from the beginning to the end, Henry never let go of June. Finally, Henry finished his call outside the door and came in. She's really angry this time. Can you apologize to her first? Chapter 4. There was a moment when I wanted to grab the table lamp from the bedside table and hit Henry on the head to see what was going on in his mind. Remembering the doctor's advice today about pregnant women not getting angry, I took a deep breath, gritting my teeth until it hurt. Get lost. Henry furrowed his brows, his voice turning colder. Flora, you've crossed the line too far. My ass. I suddenly sat up. Henry, when the company had problems, you came to me. When June throws a tantrum, you come to me. You're such a pathetic excuse for a man. I sneered, why are you even alive? You might as well just die. Emotion stirred in Henry's eyes, the veins on his forearm bulging. For a moment, I thought he was going to come over and hit me. After a while, he coldly said, Flora, don't regret it. With that, he forcefully slammed the door and left. This wasn't the first time. During the years when June was abroad and her father got involved in legal fundraising, her family fell on hard times. Now, the only lifeline she can hold on to is Henry. But Henry is already married to me, so she can only be a hidden mistress. She wants to push me aside, so she constantly provokes me every few days. I'm not one to tolerate her, and I always manage to infuriate her. When Henry can't pacify her, he has to come to me and apologize on his behalf. He knows that because of Henry's mother's influence, I won't refuse any of his requests. But over these years, I single-handedly revived Henry's family company from the brink of death to its current thriving state, constantly expanding the business. It can be said that without me, Henry's family would have been finished long ago. I don't owe them anything anymore. The next day, when I arrived at the office, I suddenly felt that something was off. People passing by were secretly glancing at me, hesitant to speak. It wasn't until I reached the entrance of my office that I discovered my belongings had been thrown out, scattered all over the floor. My favorite cup was shattered into pieces. I frowned. What's going on here? Someone unexpected came out of my office, pushing the door open. June casually glanced at the scattered items on the floor and sneered, "Helping you move. You know, since you're pregnant and it might be inconvenient for you, I thought I'd kindly help you move." I stood there stunned. "How did you end up here?" June leaned against the door frame, smirking. "Don't you know yet?" Henry really, he can forget to mention such things. "Flora, Henry has fired you. You're no longer the general manager of Star River. You can leave now." Her airy voice echoed in my ears like a thunderclap. Instinctively, I asked, "Fired me? Who is the new general manager?" I thought of a ridiculous possibility, but it was so absurd that I couldn't believe it. June seemed to relish in my current expression. She walked over and turned the nameplate on the desk. "I just casually mentioned it, and he insisted on letting you go. Made me feel really guilty." A mocking smile played at the corner of her lips as she stood in front of me and whispered, "Flora, did you really think you could hold on to his money? Let me tell you, you won't be able to keep anything. This is outrageous." I turned my head to look at the others. Their expressions weren't pleasant either, but they remained silent. Just then, Henry approached. I hurriedly walked up to him. "Henry, what is the meaning of this? How could you just fire me like that?" Henry calmly replied, "I did it for your own good. You're pregnant now, and it's inconvenient for you. Let June help you, and you can focus on preparing for childbirth at home." I couldn't believe it. "Her? You're making her the general manager? She's an artist. This will ruin Star River. We still have the government waiting for the development project in the southern suburbs. What will happen to the project now that you fired me?" Henry crossed his arms and sneered, "Flora, you think too highly of yourself. Do you think the company won't survive without you? Star River was doing just fine when you weren't here." Suddenly, it all made sense to me. This was Henry's retaliation for me not apologizing to June yesterday, or perhaps they had already colluded and were just waiting for the right moment to bring me down. "Henry," I still suppressed my anger, "this will ruin Star River. You can't be so irresponsible." "Ruining Star River?" Henry looked me up and down. "I think you're the one who can't let go of power, Flora. Ever since you entered the company, everyone only knows you as the president. Who even remembers that I'm the chairman of the company? I think you're trying to take over Star River." I stared at Henry in disbelief. So that's how it is. He feels that I have overshadowed him. But is this what I wanted? Henry's mother brought me into Star River with the purpose of protecting and supporting him. But for these past years, Henry has only been concerned with drinking, racing with his second-generation friends, and having fun. How could he possibly have time to focus on the company's business? Even if I tirelessly advised him and tried to make him learn about company management, he would impatiently say, "What use is it for me to learn? My mom brought you into the company to work for me, didn't she?" There was no choice. I had to shoulder Star River all by myself. During those years, Star River was on a downward spiral, with shaky finances and major clients leaving one after another. I went door to door, humbling myself, begging each client to come back. When a client's mother fell ill, I spent nearly a month at the hospital, neglecting my own well-being. Finally, I moved them and they placed an order again. During that month, I lost 12 kilograms. My clothes hung loosely on me. When I finally came out, I went out to drink, facing those greasy, difficult, and vulgar clients. No one could help me. Sometimes I look back and can't believe how I managed to handle it all by myself. During those years, it can be said that without me, there would be no Star River as it is today. But now, after Henry has used me up, he kicked me out of the company. I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh, taking a step back. Henry, does Auntie know what you're doing? His face slightly changed, then he angrily retorted, this is my family's business, my company. I don't need to report to anyone. June leaned against Henry, smirking. Flora, who do you think you are? A hint of disdain flashed in her eyes. You're just a lowly employee. Pack up your things and get out. I looked at the man in front of me, standing there dumbfounded. After a moment, I smiled. All right, Henry. You're impressive. I'm leaving. Chapter 5. After leaving the company, I received many phone calls. They were all from the company's executives. They explained to me that Henry had a meeting early in the morning and they had also raised their concerns, but Henry rejected them all. I closed my phone and aimlessly walked the streets. As I walked, I suddenly felt a pain in my stomach. The pain quickly spread throughout my body, and I suddenly felt a rush of warmth flowing from my lower body. I looked down. I don't know when, but my skirt was already soaked in blood. When I was taken into the operating room, the doctor told me that the baby might not survive. I mustered the strength to make a call to Henry. Not that I had any hope left for him, but this child was something I promised his mother, and he had the right to know. Henry, I'm at the hospital now. My stomach was in so much pain that it was almost numb. I struggled to maintain a steady voice, but it still trembled slightly. The doctor says the baby might not make it. I just wanted to let you know. Upon hearing this, Henry just coldly laughed. Flora, when did you learn to resort to crying, making a scene, or even threatening to commit suicide? Do you think by using the child as leverage, I'll let you come back? I silently hung up the phone, slowly lifted my hand, and placed it on my abdomen. In truth, when I found out June had returned, I had already lost any anticipation for this child. Sometimes, I even had fleeting thoughts that he was a source of shame, a constant reminder that my husband's love had always belonged to another woman. But as the days went by, I felt him growing inside me, and that inexplicable connection between us became stronger and stronger. I've thought about it. If Henry doesn't want this child, I will take him away. He's been with me for so long, my child. I closed my eyes, and a tear rolled down my cheek. The first face I saw was Bruce's, wearing a black hoodie, looking like a college student. He rushed over with an anxious expression on his face. How are you? Does it hurt? Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere? The nurse glanced at him and said, the patient is still under the effect of anesthesia. The pain will start later in the evening. I was startled and weakly asked, why are you here? He looked at me, his eyes almost turning red. My aunt works here as a doctor. When we came last time, she saw you and just called me. Bruce carefully pushed me into the hospital room. With the doctor actually there was no need to stay in the hospital for a miscarriage, but he still worried and insisted on staying for a day to observe before going home. The next day, when I was discharged, Bruce insisted that I go to his place. That guy, he doesn't treat you well. He definitely won't take care of you. You just had a miscarriage, and no one is there to take care of you. How can that be? He frowned. After thinking for a moment, I agreed. To be honest, I've rarely had vulnerable moments in my life. Since I was young, my survival mode has always been tougher than others, and I've always managed on my own. But for some reason, when I'm alone, I can grit my teeth and keep moving forward, but when someone genuinely cares, I become fragile. I really don't want to go back to that house where I'm all alone. Chapter 6. I thought Bruce's idea of taking care of me was just empty words. He comes from a privileged background, with a better family background than Henry. He has been writing books because his aspirations are not in business. Bruce has been quite successful in the field of writing. The film adaptations of his 3 novels have all grossed over $2 billion, and he has sold various rights, making him quite famous in the industry. How could someone like him really know how to take care of others? But I didn't expect him to be serious about it. Bruce personally cooks every meal. The dishes are not complicated, just 3 dishes and a soup, but they are surprisingly delicious, especially the mushroom chicken soup. I drank 3 big bowls the first time I had it. How are you so good at cooking? I was puzzled. Bruce smiled and looked at me with a twinkle in his eyes. The warm light in the kitchen made his hair appear as a warm shade of golden. Bruce's dining table is not very big, and the two of us sit together to eat. He reaches out and touches my hair. My mom always said that a man who can't cook won't find a wife. She started training me to cook when I was very young. This is nothing. I can do a lot more. He winked at me. You hit the jackpot with me. I was about to laugh when, for no reason, I suddenly remembered the time I spent with Henry. Henry couldn't cook, or rather, he didn't know how to take care of anyone. He didn't like eating food made by others. Throughout the years we were together, I was the one cooking at home. Sometimes, even when I was sick, I had to muster the strength to get up and cook. Back then, I didn't feel anything. I owed Henry's family, and besides, I had already gone through days of not having enough food since I was young. At that time, I thought I was already living a good enough life. Until now, I suddenly realized that I have rarely been taken care of in the first half of my life. I have always been running, striving ahead of others, but no one has ever cherished me. Being kicked out of Star River wasn't as painful as I thought it would be. I worked at Star River for 9 years, resurrecting it along the way. Star River has become like a child to me. I was used to being busy for Star River, but these past few days, suddenly having free time, not needing to travel for business, not receiving endless phone calls, not attending countless meetings, surprisingly, it feels quite comfortable. Bruce likes to stay in his study during the day, which is covered with thick carpets. When the sunlight is warm, I would sit next to him on the recliner and read a book. We discuss the plot together, sometimes even arguing about a scene, talking incessantly for a whole morning. Bruce would threaten me, "Do you still want to eat sweet and sour spare ribs for lunch?" I hold on to his casual wear and tilt my head. I won't eat them if I don't want to. But at noon, he would still make sweet and sour spare ribs. In the afternoon, we would take a nap together, drawing the curtains tightly so that not a trace of light comes through. He would hug me from behind, and we would sleep until 3 o'clock. After writing for another 2 hours, we would go grocery shopping hand in hand, have dinner, and cuddle up in bed to watch a movie. It's the first time I've experienced days like this, no need for arguments, no need for rushing around, just mutual companionship. Sometimes, it feels like happiness is too good to be true. That night, while lying in Bruce's arms watching a movie, I suddenly received a call from Henry's mother. I hesitated for a moment but still answered. "Mom?" There was anger in Henry's mother's voice. "I heard that little bastard fired you." I was taken aback. Henry's mother has always been gentle, and it's the first time I've heard her curse someone. I just went to scold him, but this time he seems determined to push that woman into the company. She took a deep breath to calm herself down and said, "Flora, don't be angry. Mom will scold him later. Mom knows how much you have sacrificed for our family all these years. It's his immaturity. Mom apologizes to you on his behalf." I could tell that she was genuinely angry. Henry's mother is a very sensible person. She understands very well that without me, Henry is nothing. He won't be able to keep Star River. I looked at Bruce, who was listening attentively. The anger and resentment from being kicked out of Star River completely subsided at this moment. I calmly said, "It's all right, Mom. I haven't told you yet, but when I was fired that day, I also lost the baby. I had a miscarriage. It's been 9 years now, and we have lost the child. I plan to divorce Henry." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. This was something we had discussed before. She supported me for 9 years, I helped Henry for 9 years. Now that Henry doesn't need me anymore, and even the only tie between us, the child, is gone, it's time for me to leave. Henry's mother and I both know that I won't turn back. After a while, her voice trembled with a hint of choking, and she forced a smile and said, "Good child, our family has delayed you all these years. I had hoped that you two would make it, but he didn't have the fortune, no fate with you. Don't worry, Mom won't take away a single thing that belongs to you. From now on," her voice quivered, "you live your life well. Mom won't stop you this time." A few minutes later, Henry called. As soon as I picked up, I heard him shouting in anger. "Flora, why didn't you tell me about losing the baby? I replied coldly, Henry, if your brain is damaged, go get it checked. How did you become senile at such a young age? I didn't tell you. What did you say yourself? Have you forgotten everything? Henry paused. You thought I was threatening you. You thought I was doing all this for that damn general manager? I sneered, Henry, keep your precious general manager. I'll wait and see when Star River dies. I'm just afraid that your deceased father's spirit will come and strangle you in your dreams at night. Star River is already at its end under your leadership. With that, I hung up the phone directly. I wasn't like this before. Back then, I was gentle and obedient to Henry. We didn't have to hurt each other. It was all because he pushed me to this point. Chapter 7. After recovering my health, I went back home that day. I'm sorry, I didn't expect you to have a miscarriage. He looked up at me, his voice slightly subdued. I remained silent. In truth, I felt like there was nothing left to say between Henry and me. I handed him the divorce agreement directly. I've divided all the assets. Take a look and let me know if you have any objections. He paused, his head snapping up. Suddenly, Flora, you want to divorce me? Yes. I glanced at my phone. Do you have any plans for tomorrow? If not, it's best to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 a.m. Henry quickly skimmed through the agreement, his expression turning sour. Is it because of that young man? I couldn't be bothered to argue with him, so I simply nodded. Yes, we fell in love at first sight, were deeply enamored upon second meeting, and decided to spend our lives together at the third. I can't wait to marry him. Henry suddenly stood up. He was broad-shouldered and tall, especially when angry, his shirt stretched tightly across his chest, creating a sense of oppression that made me instinctively take a step back. Flora, have you forgotten that you're already married? His face turned pale. Does that young man know that you have a husband? I chuckled. Of course. Didn't you get married too? June doesn't mind that you have a wife. Henry stumbled over his words, his complexion growing even darker. He took a step closer. I've looked into that young man. What can a lousy writer like him offer you? He pointed around. Can he give you everything you have now? Don't you want a divorce? I was somewhat surprised. If I don't divorce you, what about June? Henry glanced at me quickly, feeling somewhat irritated. We haven't reached that point yet. Besides, my mom likes you. She won't let us get divorced. You don't need to worry about that. I said calmly, I've already talked to your mom. She agreed. A momentary blankness flashed across Henry's face. She agreed? I nodded. He grabbed my shoulder tightly, causing me some pain. Flora, where else can you go if you leave my family? What else can you do? Is it necessary for you to give up everything you've worked so hard for all these years just because of a momentary impulse? I slowly moved his hand away, staring at him intently. Wasn't it you who forced me to give up? You forced me to leave Star River, causing me to lose my child. Henry, haven't you taken everything away from me, and now you're pretending what? Henry was speechless. After a moment, a hint of panic appeared on his face. I didn't mean to, Flora. Didn't you like me? You didn't let go all these years, and now you're suddenly letting go? Do you think I stayed with you all these years just because I liked you? I whispered. Henry, your mom and I made an agreement. She supported me for 9 years, and I helped you with Star River for 9 years. Now the time is up. I handed him the divorce agreement. Henry, I don't owe your family anything anymore. There was a moment of shock on Henry's face, and after a long while, his throat seemed to be blocked, his voice tight and hoarse. What did you say? I said the time is up, I repeated. Henry, let's get divorced. Chapter 8. The argument that day ended without a resolution, as Henry refused to agree to the divorce. I packed my belongings and moved out of the villa, settling into Bruce's home. Even though I wasn't at Star River anymore, my former colleagues still liked to talk to me. That new general manager who came in is only there because of Chairman Henry. She doesn't know anything. She can't even understand the reports I give her and still tries to give me instructions. It's really frustrating. Yeah, she only shows up for a short time each day and can't even find someone to sign the documents. Last time, that proposal was already approved, but she insisted on sending it back for a redo. There's simply not enough time. I lowered my eyelashes. June studied art and had no clue about company management. Henry wasn't any better than her. With Star River in their hands, it wouldn't survive for long. Sure enough, not even 2 months later, when I was preparing for the divorce lawsuit, the former vice president of the company called me in a hurry. Star River is in trouble. June, disregarding our objections, insisted on buying a distressed asset package. When we didn't agree, she went straight to Chairman Henry, and he gave his approval. From his tone, I could hear his disdain and resentment. She didn't even look carefully. Later, we found out that the land in that asset package was mortgaged. It can't be developed at all, and the funding chain has been broken. It's all over now. The vice president trembled. All our years of hard work are gone. Once the funding chain is broken, everything else will collapse. Flora, what do we do? I don't know either, I said with a bitter smile. I'm not a miracle worker. I can only say that it's fate. Star River descended into chaos after the distressed asset package incident. Henry and June went to the bank to apply for a loan. I had dealt with the bank president when I took over Star River. He was a greasy man who liked to force people to drink. At that time, I had to drink 2 small glasses of white wine to secure that loan. But June couldn't bear the injustice and exploded under the bank president's relentless pressure, pouring the wine on his face. This created a big mess, as the bank president's expression changed immediately, and he made a harsh statement, "You can forget about ever getting a penny from our bank for the rest of your lives." Star River, what a bunch of clowns. Afterward, June cried and complained to Henry, but he pushed her away. When Henry was with her before, I took care of everything while he only focused on eating, drinking, and having fun. Now that he's handling things on his own, he realizes how difficult it is. He accuses June, saying, "Why can't you just endure a little and control your temper?" June, shocked and angry, responds, "He forced me to drink." My dad has never forced me to drink. Didn't you see the way he looked at me, all lecherous? Flora can endure, why can't you? Henry instinctively retorts this statement completely ignites June's anger. Flora, all you've been doing these past few days is thinking about Flora, glued to your phone. Since you can't let her go, why are you still with me? Go find her then. Henry's face darkens. Can you stop being so unreasonable all the time? Am I being unreasonable? June raises her voice even louder. Is it the first time I'm like this? If you can't bear it, then just leave. June breaks up normally. When June says something like this, Henry would start to appease her. But this time, whether it's because there are too many issues and it's too bothersome, or he has finally reached his limit, Henry looks at her with a steady gaze, and all the love in his eyes has turned into impatience. Fine, he says, let's break up then. June didn't expect him to actually agree this time, and for a moment, she stands there stunned, not knowing how to react. After a moment, she shouts, "Fine, let's break up. Who's afraid of you?" Then, with red eyes, she runs away. This video was sent to me by the vice president. Now that they've broken up, what's the use? The company has already been thrown into chaos by her. Flora, now that she's gone, can you come back and help us? Star River is your hard work. Are you willing to just stand by and watch it be ruined? I remained silent for a moment, then replied, "Sorry, but I won't go back." Chapter 9, Henry probably thought he could save Star River on his own, but after 2 months, Star River continued to decline, and in the end, it was beyond redemption. However, at this time, I was at Bruce's house, playing games with him, not concerned about any of this. It was Henry who called me on the phone. His voice sounded tired. Flora, can we meet? What's the matter? I took a sip of coffee. Henry clenched his hands on the table. Star River is in a very bad state now. I could tell Henry didn't look good either, with stubble on his face and heavy dark circles under his eyes. It seemed like he hadn't had a good rest in a long time. I raised an eyebrow. So what? What does it have to do with me, someone who has been fired? This time, Henry didn't retort. He lowered his head and whispered softly, "I used to think that running a company wasn't that difficult. I saw how effortlessly you handled things, even arguing with my mother about why she wouldn't let me manage the family business and instead brought in an outsider like you. These past few days, I've been running around trying to raise funds, making connections, but no one pays attention to me. They give me a hard time, even refusing to see me. I heard from old Jane that you had it even tougher than I do now. Flora, how did you manage to get through it back then? I furrowed my brow. What are you trying to say? Henry took a deep breath, his hand supporting his forehead as he closed his eyes. Come back, Flora. Both Star River and I need you. I chuckled. And what about June? Don't you and Star River need her anymore? I used to think I loved her so much. We were almost getting married, but my mother adamantly opposed and tore us apart. Henry's gaze became somewhat blank. So when she came back, I couldn't help myself. I thought I still loved her. We've been together all these days. I had the company, I had her. I thought I would be happy. He furrowed his brow slightly. But we argue almost every day, arguing about the company, arguing about you, arguing about all sorts of miscellaneous things. Do you know, when she said we should break up, my first reaction was relief? I was finally relieved. He rubbed his face. I've been thinking these days, and I realized that I'm not unable to let go of her. I was just feeling a sense of opposition against the world because everyone opposed my feelings at that time. I was just unwilling. He whispered, I couldn't help but think of you these past few days. We were good before, right, Flora? I understand now. Will you come back? We can continue like before. I won't contact June anymore. Can we live a good life together? I couldn't help but laugh at Henry's audacity. You, a cheater, have no right to say such things. I took care of the company for you, took care of the household for you. You only realized that your life was a mess without me, and you need me to do your work. Do you think I'm cheap? If it wasn't for the agreement with your mother, I would have divorced you long ago. Henry spoke hastily. No, it's not like that. I really like you. It's just that I realized it too late. It's okay if you don't want to handle the company. I can take care of things at home too. Flora, he reached out to hold my hand, please come back. I really miss you, and Mom misses you too. Just then, a hand suddenly grabbed his wrist. I looked up abruptly, and Bruce was standing there in a black turtleneck sweater, his expression slightly stern. Henry, if you have something to say, say it. Why resort to physical actions? A hint of displeasure flashed in Henry's eyes. What are you here for? Bruce smiled. To take my date home for dinner. He held onto my shoulder. Darling, the beef stew is ready. It'll get cold if we don't go back. I gave him a disdainful look. This guy is so jealous. He just had to follow when he knew Henry was going to meet me, and now he couldn't contain himself. I picked up my clothes from the chair and stood up. Sorry, I should go home for dinner. I have no interest in your company or you. If you don't sign the divorce agreement by next Monday, I will proceed with the divorce lawsuit. Goodbye. Henry stared at me in a daze, as if he wanted to say something. I walked out of the cafe, not giving him a chance to speak. I feel disgusted even thinking about saying one more word to Henry. The fact that I can sit here calmly right now is already because of his mother's face. Thinking about how I used to have feelings for this kind of person makes me want to vomit. I must have been blind. Chapter 10, Star River couldn't hold on any longer and was acquired by another major local company after 2 months. What surprised me was that after June and Henry turned against each other, they leaked the trade secrets of Star River, which June had access to the competitor. This ultimately led to the failure of Star River's final attempt to revive. Henry and June had a nasty breakup. I heard Henry sued June for leaking trade secrets. June was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Despite Henry's lack of knowledge in business operations, he couldn't let go of Star River. He sold off the family's assets in an attempt to inject funds into Star River and revive the company. Unfortunately, it ended up in vain. Star River was gone, and so was his family's fortune. Even the villa where Henry's mother lived was mortgaged by him. When the creditors came to take possession of the house, Henry's mother, who was unaware of the truth, suffered a shock and slipped into a coma. In the end, she couldn't be saved. In less than a year, Henry had completely squandered his family's wealth. Even the last person who wholeheartedly loved him was gone. After learning about this, I went to the cemetery to visit Henry's mother. I placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums in front of her tombstone. This gentle and kind woman saved my life. I had done my best to repay her and ensure she could live her later years in peace, but I still failed. Perhaps Henry and I were never meant to be together from the beginning. Between us, it was a doomed fate from start to finish. Just as I was about to leave, a deep voice suddenly came from behind me. "You're here." I turned around, and there was Henry, holding a bouquet of flowers. He looked much thinner, his collarbones protruding, and there was a sense of fragility even when he wore a black coat. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Do I hate Henry? Perhaps there was a time when I did. I used to believe that by offering my sincere heart, I could receive another in return. But later, I realized that what I got in return was a sharp knife that stabbed me, leaving me bleeding. But now, as I stand here today, I have slowly let go. Henry has already paid the price. Am I useless? He chuckled bitterly. I thought that by getting rid of you, I could completely control Star River. I wanted to show you and my mom that I'm not the worthless person who needs to be sheltered under your wings. But now, I realize that I truly am worthless. My dad spent his entire life building up Star River, and I destroyed it in just a year. I drove my mom to her death. His voice began to tremble. Flora, now even you're leaving me. I really have nothing left. The autumn wind felt desolate. I gathered my hair, which had been blown about, and remained silent. What else is there to say between us? There's nothing left but silence. I turned to leave, but Henry called out to me. His eyes were red, and for the first time in my life, I saw him shed tears. Can you stay? If I admit that I was wrong, can you give me another chance? I paused for 2 seconds, shook my head, and smiled. No. Then I walked away with long strides. Chapter 11. A year later, I started my own new company. The business was the same as Star River's before, and I hired the original team from Star River. My former colleagues, upon learning that I had started my own business, resigned from their positions and joined me in this new venture. Everyone had extensive experience, and the company gradually found its way to success. Bruce's book was also published online. Fans were discussing it fervently, saying that he used to write purely suspenseful stories, but this time he added a touch of romance and even gave it a happy ending. Moreover, there was a line on the dedication page, dedicated to my beloved. Book enthusiasts speculated whether the author Bruce was in a romantic relationship, and they bombarded him with questions on his social media. A few hours later, Bruce posted a Weibo with just one short sentence, not in a romantic relationship, but married. I heard about Henry again when Bruce and I were planning our wedding. A friend called and told me that ever since Star River was acquired, Henry had been on a downward spiral, succumbing to alcoholism. A few days ago, he got drunk and drove his car off a mountain. Fortunately, he didn't survive the accident. My friend asked cautiously, I heard that when he died, he was still holding a picture of you. Do you want to pay him a last visit? After all, you two had a history. I froze. I never expected Henry to die. For a brief moment, I suddenly remembered a few years ago when I woke up drenched in sweat from a nightmare. He anxiously sat up and hugged me, gently patting my back, comforting me, don't be afraid. I'm here. That was one of the few moments of tenderness in our tumultuous marriage. When he was alive, I hated him, but now that he's actually gone, I find myself remembering his good side. After a moment of silence, I whispered, no, I don't think so. Between us, there was only a karmic bond, and there's no need to entangle ourselves any further. Behind me, Bruce was still tangled up in his thoughts. Do you think I look good with this boutonniere? Come and have a look. I hung up the phone and turned around. Let's bid farewell like this. Farewell to the lover we never truly loved, and farewell to the less than dignified marriage.